10% of the cases where you have someone who's been a violent criminal or is a threat to society, it would seem to me that it's incumbent on us to try to identify anyone who is a threat. These bills prohibit 100% from making any inquiry, even if that person is a potential threat or a dangerous individual. And by doing this, 90% of the people who are here and undocumented, in my judgment, suffer because we won't cooperate in cases where there is a real threat. If we had that exception to these bills, I'd be very comfortable in supporting all the legislation. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to abstain on these bills, and that's not the message I want to send to undocumented individuals. But we need, in certain circumstances, to permit law enforcement to communicate. Limited circumstances, but some circumstances. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bramnick. Senator Ruiz moves the bill. Anyone further on the bill? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary to open the machine. Please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary to close the machine for a tally. Assembly Bill 6309 having received 23 votes in the affirmative, 14 in negative. I declare the bill passed. Take the usual course of passed bills. Substitution.
Motion by Senator Vitale. Resolved that pursuant to Rule 17:3, Assembly Bill 6313 be substituted for Senate Bill 5034, with which it is identical.
Senator Vitale moves the substitution. This is a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Substitution passes. Bill's on third reading.
Assembly number 6313, sponsored by Assemblywoman Lopez, establishes pilot program to support hospitals that maintain certain services when relocating, approximates $3 million.
Senator Vitale moves the bill. Anyone further on the bill? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary to open the machine. Please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary to close the machine for a tally. A6313 having received 27 votes in the affirmative, 10 in the negative. I declare the bill passed. Take use course passed bills. Substitution.
Motion by Senator Johnson. Resolved that pursuant to Rule 17:3, Assembly Bill number 6308 be substituted for Senate Bill 5036, with which it is identical.
Senator Schapisi.
You just heard from my colleague, Assemblyman Bramnick, and I agree with everything that he said. If you look at this piece of legislation in this bill, the very first statement is, this legislature finds and declares one of the founding principles of this nation is the freedom to worship in peace. Our religious institutions should be places where community members feel safe to convene. Individuals should not be deterred from attending their places of worship out of a general fear that their personal freedom to assemble for worship may be encumbered. Schools, hospitals, shelters, courthouses, and other essential government services should be safe and accessible to all eligible community members who are seeking services. That I agree with. However, the bill put before us goes far beyond its stated intent, and quite frankly gives me grave concern that it puts public safety at risk. When you look at 5036 in conjunction with 5037 and 5038, we include provisions that restrict our jails, our correctional facilities, our law enforcement from communicating with federal immigration authorities. We're not talking about law-abiding individuals. We're not talking about people who are looking to worship or bring their family members to a hospital. We're talking about also precluding and creating safe zones for people who have already been convicted for serious crimes, human trafficking, gang activity, sexual assault, and other violent offenses. And I don't know why we have decided to include that within these bills. Just this week, there was an individual arrested who was here, undocumented, from Mexico, convicted, not accused, convicted, of distributing controlled dangerous substances within 1,000 feet of a school, aggravated manslaughter, aggravated assault involving serious bodily injury in Camden County. These bills protect him. The idea that we are extending special protections to people such as this individual, I don't think is the intent of what we are looking to do. The pendulum on both sides has swung excessively, and this bill further perpetuates that. I have an amendment that simply restores common sense, that does what the intent that is stated in this bill does, and all it does is remove correctional facilities from these restrictions, because cooperation between law enforcement agencies is essential to keeping our entire community safe, including those who are here as undocumented individuals. This body should not undermine public safety. I urge my colleagues to support this very simple amendment that keeps the protections that this bill claims it wants to keep and takes out correctional facilities.
Before you make your motion,
yeah.
I'll let you make it in just a second. Procedurally, I want to move the substitution first. So Senator Johnson moves the substitution. That's a voice vote. All those in favor of that signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Substitution passes.
Okay.
Now you can make
Mr. President, pursuant to Senate Rule 17-2, I move that Senate Bill 5036 be placed back on second reading for the purpose of amendment to remove correctional facilities.
Thank you. Senator Ruiz, why do you rise?
Mr. President, I move pursuant to Rule 17:2 that to table the motion, not what I have here, but I'm so sorry. Here. It's very late in the day. I rise to table the motion, Senate President.
Okay. The vote will be on the motion to table. Green supports the motion to table. Red is against the motion to table. I indicate the Secretary open the machine. Please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct Secretary to close the machine for a tally. The motion to table receiving 25 votes in the affirmative, 14 in the negative. The motion to table, I declare it as passed. Okay. Bill's on third reading.
Assembly number 6308, sponsored by Assemblywoman Park. Safe Communities Act requires AG to develop certain model policies.
Senator Johnson moves the bill. Anyone further on the bill? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary to open the machine. Please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary to close the machine for a tally. A6308 have received 24 votes in the affirmative, 13 in the negative. I declare the bill passed. Take usual course past bills. Substitution.
Motion by Senator Timberlake, resolved that pursuant to Rule 17:3, Assembly Bill 6310 be substituted for Senate Bill 5038, with which it is identical.
Senator Timberlake moves the substitution. This is a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Substitution passes. Bill's on third reading.
Assembly Bill number 6310, sponsored by Assemblywoman Park, codifies AG directives strengthening trust between law enforcement and immigrant communities.
Senator Bucco. Why do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. For years, we've been told that New Jersey's Immigrant Trust Directive is about public safety. But the reality is prohibiting communications between law enforcement agencies does not make us safer. It makes us vulnerable. We don't have to speculate about that. We've already lived the consequences. The bipartisan 9/11 Commission, chaired by our former Governor Tom Kean Sr., dedicated an entire chapter to eliminating silos that had existed between law enforcement agencies. The report concluded that when these agencies don't communicate together, that is a contributing factor to missing information that could lead to preventing serious crime or terrorism. We have spent a great deal of time and money in this state developing community policing. We've asked our law enforcement agencies, our local law enforcement agencies, to go out in the community, to learn the residents that they protect. But yet, this directive would prohibit the communications between those very agencies that know the community and the federal agencies that may be coming in to conduct an arrest. Just this last weekend, in my district, there were a number of arrests. And in some instances, they became chaotic because local law enforcement and the county sheriff's office had no idea that this was about to happen. I spoke to the sheriff. I've communicated with law enforcement, the local units. And in each instance, what they said to me is, if they had been notified and were able to participate, it would have went a lot easier and a lot better. And people would have been safer. This bill prohibits that communications. We cannot require law enforcement agencies to separate. We need complete communications between local, county, and federal law enforcement departments. The 9/11 report was very clear on this very fact. And that's why if you look at this bill and you go back and you look at the history, you'll see that the New Jersey State Chiefs of Police Association opposed this legislation for that very reason. These are the folks that are on the ground protecting our communities. Why would we cut them out? It makes no sense. When government mandates silos instead of coordination, the result is confusion, failure, and tragedy. And we owe it to our communities never to repeat those mistakes. And it is for that reason that I cannot support this legislation.
Thank you, Senator Bucco. Anyone, did we move? Yeah, right. Anyone further on the bill? Seeing none? Senator McCurdy?
Thank you, Senate President, through you. and with all respect to the comments made by my dear friend, the minority leader, I think the example that he provided illustrates exactly why this legislation is needed to promote public safety in our state. Any federal agency coming into our municipalities, coming into this state to operate and to carry out their mission, including ICE, should be notifying local law enforcement that they're doing so. Under this administration, ICE has made a habit of not doing that. Nothing in this bill would preclude any federal agency from making those notifications that would further public safety to our local law enforcement. Rather, this bill is designed to ensure that violent criminals, gang members, those who are committing crimes against the public safety, crimes against the citizens of our state and all of our constituents are brought to justice. And many times that requires victims and witnesses to come forward who choose not to do so when they are in fear of deportation, even if they have committed no wrongdoing, even if they are guilty of no misconduct, beyond what some in this chamber would say is misconduct in the form of a civil immigration violation, sometimes violations that they're not even aware of. But in terms of no actual crime other than a federal civil immigration violation. And the data shows in other jurisdictions, for example, including red states where these types of protections are present for victims and witnesses and immigrants in these communities, that particularly for domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking offenses, but also more broadly for other violent crimes, that immigrant victims and witnesses aren't coming forward because there's a lack of trust. The trust has been breached between them and their governments. And what we need is to restore that trust between our communities and law enforcement in this state, particularly the local, county, and state levels. Now, I will not belabor the points that have been well publicized in the media about what this particular ICE has been doing across the country, yanking not just law-abiding immigrants with no criminal records whatsoever out of their cars, but American citizens and green card holders and lawful permanent residents out of their cruise ship bedrooms with their spouses in stages of undress, in bed with them, after honorably serving our country in uniform as veterans of our armed forces. American citizens who've served our country honorably in uniform in other contexts, taking their kids to school, to daycare, and indeed last week, ending the life of a mother of 3. One of those kids, 6 years old, now an orphan. And I hugged my 6-year-old son a little tighter when I dropped him off at school later on last week. Because even though, like all of you, I have taken an oath to defend this Constitution many, many times as a Marine, as a lawmaker, as an attorney before the Supreme Court of this state, and to practice before the Supreme Court of the United States, I was born in India to an American parent. And I've been an American all my life, but I was born abroad. And my kids and my wife and I are of a color where I wonder if I should be carrying around a passport card or a copy of my passport, because Americans are being detained and even deported by this ICE. To strengthen trust between our immigrant communities and our law enforcement, we're also protecting taxpayer resources. Our cops should be solving crime and preventing violence on our streets. And anyone who commits those crimes against our citizens should be brought to justice. They should go through our criminal justice system. Nobody in this chamber, to my knowledge, on either side of the aisle is suggesting we abolish our prisons. Those folks should be brought to justice, and they should answer for their crimes. And their victims deserve justice. Not to see them deported before they appear in court and answer for these accusations, but that means that we have to promote trust. And finally, Senate President, I would argue that if our local law enforcement officers are subjected to being deputized as federal immigration civil enforcers when they just got $75 billion to do that, average over the next 4 years, $25 billion a year, that's 10 times the DEA's annual budget. The ATF, while we're facing school shootings and gun violence, has an annual budget of $1.6 billion a year. While they have all the federal resources to do that, do we want to be spending our taxpayer resources deputizing our officers to do that and taking them away from their law enforcement missions in our communities? Do we want to put our local property taxpayers on the hook for the liability when inevitable civil damages result from those lawsuits because they were standing alongside ICE while people's civil rights are violated? I think we owe more to our taxpayers than that. They don't enjoy the immunity that federal officers enjoy, absent a better Bivens remedy and under the Federal Tort Claims Act. Our taxpayers will not be spared that liability, which is why I ask my colleagues to let our brave heroes in uniform, in law enforcement, in our state and in our counties, in our municipalities, focus on doing their jobs to prevent crime and to enforce the law, and not subject them to doing the jobs of federal civil enforcers who have been afforded enough resource to do that. Allow victims and witnesses to cooperate with our law enforcement bodies and ensure that we are showing our immigrant neighbors that in the state that Ellis Island calls home, in the state in whose waters Lady Liberty sits, that immigrants are welcome among us. Immigrants sit in these chambers among us. Thank you, Senate President.
Thank you, Senator McCurdy. Senator Shapisi?
Senate President, on the bill, and based upon the comments that my colleague across the aisle just said, in the event this does move forward, I would request, there appears to be a serious typo that doesn't reflect what my colleague just said. Section 2C says, except as set forth in subsection D and E of the section, a state, county, or municipal law enforcement agency or officer shall not provide the following assistance to federal immigration authorities when the sole purpose is to enforce federal civil immigration law. Subsection 5 says, notice of a detained individual's upcoming release from custody unless the information is publicly available or the relevant immigration authorities have presented a valid judicial warrant requiring notification, and the detainee, A, is currently charged with or has ever been convicted of, adjudicated delinquent for, or found not guilty by reason of insanity for a violent or serious offense. I believe in rushing this through and understanding that a lot of bills have come up that it's supposed to say, instead of and the detainee, it should say unless the detainee. That is a material item in this, in which the way the language is drafted in the bill that we are passing tonight, we are actually protecting the very people that my colleague said we are not intending on doing so. So if this goes to the governor's office, I just want to make sure that a conditional veto to have the appropriate language and not have and the detainee, but the appropriate language to exclude those detainees from the spirit of intent of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Spizzi. Anyone further on the bill? Seeing none, the Director Secretary of the Machine, please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary to close the machine for a tally. A 6310 have received 23 votes in the affirmative, 13 in the negative. I declare the bill passed. Take your scores past bills. Senate Bill S. 4816, concurrence with Governor's conditional veto.
Resolution by Senator Vitale. Be it resolved by the Senate that the governor's recommendations to Senate Bill 4816 be adopted.
Senate will now move to adopt and concur with the governor's conditional veto of Senate Bill number S. 4816. Senator Vitale moves the concurrence. Anyone further on the concurrence? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary to open the machine. Please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary to close the machine for a tally. Senate Bill number 4816. I received 39 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. I declare the bill passed. Take your course to pass bills. Concurrence with Assembly amendments.
Resolution by Senator Ruiz. Be it resolved that the Senate will concur in the Assembly amendments to Senate Bill number 2283.
Senator Vitale moves the concurrence. Anyone further on the concurrence? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary to open the machine. Please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary to close the machine for a tally. Senate Bill number 2283, having received 35 votes in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. I declare the bill passed. Take use course past bills. Thank you. Concurrence with Assembly amendments.
Resolution by Senator Lagana. Be it resolved that the Senate will concur in the Assembly amendments to Senate Bill number 4387.
Senator Lagana moves the concurrence. Anyone further on the concurrence? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary to open the machine. Please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary to close the machine for a tally. The motion to concur with Assembly amendments to Senate Bill number 4387. I received 39 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. I declare it passed. Take the usual course past bills.
Resolution by Senator Ruiz. Be it resolved that the Senate will concur in the Assembly amendments to Senate Bill number 4834.
Thank you. Senator Moriarty moves the concurrence. Further on the concurrence? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary to open the machine. Please record your vote. Are we doing? All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary to close the machine for tally. The motion to concur with the Assembly amendments to Senate Bill number 4834. There received 28 votes in the affirmative, 10 in the negative. I declare it passed. Take this course past bills. Concurrence with Assembly amendments.
Resolution by Senator Ruiz. Be it resolved that the Senate will concur in the Assembly amendments to Senate Bill number 4847.
Senator Ruiz, la que lo echó el otro día. Anyone further on the concurrence? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary of the machine. Please record your vote.
Hola, hola, querida comunidad.
23 votes in, 13 in negative. I declare it passed. Take this course past. Concurrence with Assembly.
Resolution by Senator Smith. Be it resolved that the Senate will concur in the Assembly amendments to Senate Bill number 4877.
Senator Smith moves the concurrence. Anyone further? Seeing none, I direct the Secretary to open the machine. Please record your vote. All votes recorded properly recorded. I direct the Secretary.
Vamos a improvisar y después terminamos en orden y nos vamos.
The motion to concur with Assembly amendments to Senate Bill number 4877. Have received 39 votes in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. I declare it passed.
No, no, porque afuera. Llévala afuera y yo voy con la cámara. Hola, hola, querida comunidad. Pues informarles que finalmente ha pasado. Vamos a entrevistar. Deme un momento. Itzel. Itzel. Ok. All right. En un momento vamos a entrevistar a la compañera Itzel otra vez, esta vez definitivamente, porque ya finalmente terminó la sesión del Senado que ha tomado básicamente todo el día. Itzel, ¿de qué organización eres?
Yo soy parte del Comité de Servicio de Amigos Americanos, o AFC, conocido por sus siglas en inglés.
Y cuéntanos la buena noticia de ahora.
Bueno, la excelente noticia para la comunidad es que después de un año de estar debajo ataque por los agentes federales de diferentes agencias y esta administración, afortunadamente hemos tenido la habilidad de poder vamos a hacer de lugares como escuelas, hospitales, lugares donde haya cuidado, shelters o servicios sociales tengan la habilidad de tener un nivel de protección.
La otra pregunta que tenía Itzel es que ahora, ¿qué mensaje le mandamos a la comunidad inmigrante en medio de todavía esta persecución y la criminalización?
Pues lo mismo de siempre, mi gente, salir con cuidado, cuidarnos, echarnos la mano unos a los otros, y si algo hemos aprendido de esta sesión es que aunque acabamos de ver este día pasar en estas últimas 12, 13 horas que hemos estado aquí, esa es una pelea que de hecho tomó 6 años, y eso se tiene que recargar y se le tiene que recordar siempre a la comunidad que el cambio es lento, pero llega, y la única forma de ganar es asegurándonos que nunca nos vamos por empezando con cada uno de los hijos.
Muchas gracias, Itzel. Ahí escucharon de Itzel, básicamente ya se ganó después de tantos tiempo, de tantos, ya casi 2 años de la lucha que se hizo a través de diferentes organizaciones y también sindicatos, grupos, activistas, líderes comunitarios y la misma comunidad. Finalmente la campaña de lo que se llamaba originalmente la propuesta de ley del Immigrant Trust Act o la Acta de Confianza en el Inmigrante se convirtió en 3 biles separados y finalmente ya pasó la Asamblea y ahora mismo ha pasado en el Senado y ahora va al escritorio del gobernador Phil Murphy para que lo firme y finalmente terminar este ciclo, porque ya mañana al mediodía, a las 12 del mediodía, se acaba esta sesión legislativa y comienza una nueva. Por eso era muy importante hacerlo ahora. Entonces vamos a ver qué más tenemos por ahí.